Wow, stories.
This is going to be a long one, and it will have a lot of backstory, so bear with me here. My wife and I have been married for 8 months and have been living with my parents while attending graduate school. Before getting married, my parents helped a ton with our wedding and offered us the chance to stay with them as long as we needed, rent-free, to save up as much money as possible and buy a house. We live in a very high cost of living major city, and houses are priced over $1 million. However, living at home after marriage has not been easy due to several dynamics. My mom and wife have had a very hot and cold relationship since they met. Since she moved in, my mom has been highly critical of my wife, both privately to me and in front of my wife. She has criticized her cleaning ability, her family's, my in-laws, cleanliness, her willingness to work hard, her commitment to family values, more on that later, her personal hygiene, and her treatment of me. This is all that comes to mind in the moment, and I'm sure I am missing a lot. Mom believes my wife has changed me and made me less involved with my family and turned me into an unclean person. She called my wife a filthy animal because of her disagreement with how my wife takes care of herself, as it relates to her shower routine and how she maintains our room. My parents have always been clean freaks, and while I would consider myself a clean person, I'm not as obsessive about it as them. As alluded to, Mom comes into our room and reorganizes stuff. When we expressed a desire for privacy, I know it's their house. But as a new couple, come on. She also has this fixation on rules, and my wife doing things exactly the way my family does, with cleaning and maintaining the house, amongst other things. To put it simply, my family and my wife's family do things very differently. Now, to be very clear, I have stood up for my wife and have sternly denounced any commentary about her, but this has not dissuaded my mom. My mom and wife also have different overall worldviews. Mom is radically enmeshed with her family, parents/siblings, and if anyone remotely criticizes them or their ways, she explodes and says something along the lines of, "How dare you, they did so much for you." It is basically guilt-tripping one into thinking they are indebted to her family. Yes, I will admit my grandparents, aunts, and uncles have done a lot for me, but to leverage this to control one's actions feels wrong. She was sheltered by her parents and has the exact same mentality and worldview they do. They come from a rural village and did not achieve higher levels of education, so possibly lack critical thinking ability. All she knows is family. My wife, on the other hand, is a very simple soul and had a simple upbringing. She can be temperamental and confrontational, which at times has exacerbated issues between them. But she does not want to cause problems. Like me, she just wants to have peace and a good marriage, with the same autonomy that an average couple would enjoy. My wife and I are very religious, and because of our views, we could not attend a family member of a different faith's function early on in our marriage. My mom threw a fit for a good few weeks, saying that I was selfish, losing my family values, and insulting other religions. This family member attended my wedding, and I care for them very much, and I have no qualms about their beliefs. But I stood my ground and said, "You are telling me to respect other beliefs, but you are not respecting mine." I was very respectful, while insults were levied at me left, right, and center. From this, other issues built up, and things reached a point where my wife and I had to stay at her parents' place for 2 weeks in December. Things improved gradually when we got back, and there were smaller hiccups here and there, but nothing major. This was until about a month ago when I used some of my savings, money we got from our wedding gifts, to pay for some courses and counseling. I transferred the money from my savings account, which is joint with my wife, to my checking account, which my mom is my guarantor on, and I am the same for hers, to pay my credit card off. She flipped out because I had initially agreed to use the money for a down payment on a property. While that was still the plan, I don't want to accrue interest on my credit card, and I'd rather borrow from myself than pay interest, and refill my savings later on. I was called selfish for seeking out counseling for the previous issues, and this turned into a big fiasco. Mom insisted on seeing the bank statements, but I told her no, it's not her concern. But she leveraged my grandparents again and said they were hurt by my behavior and that I broke their trust. This did not bother me, as I knew it was empty threats. However, I had no choice but to show her. Because of relentless pressure and it affecting my wife's academics, she ended up failing her midterm because of all the stress my mom put on us. From there, things got better again. But the lingering fear of another outburst has been in the back of my head and my wife's. The comfort of home and sense of security has all but disappeared. This was the third outburst my mom had. Now I have not mentioned my dad, and he has his share of issues too. He initially was on my side throughout all these issues, but when faced with my mom, he switched up on me and levied insults about my wife and me. He told me that we got married too soon, he got married at the same age I did, we're immature, that we did not contribute around the house, which is false. We contribute to the cooking and cleaning as much as everyone else. But due to us being the new couple, there seems to be an expectation that we do more, despite being in grad school. That she was spoiled, lazy, and not prepared for marriage. He also told me that I was abandoning my mother in favor of my wife. Whenever my wife cooks, she usually cooks for the whole family. But sometimes for just me and her, she cleans up after herself. But he goes back and cleans up again when there is negligible to no mess. And he in turn points out the small things that were missed. He does the same when she cleans the bathroom or sweeps the floors, but when my sister or I do those things, he leaves it be. He also always hovers over my wife when she is cooking, telling her to place dishes in a certain place, or other small technicalities when he himself does not cook at all. Being in school, we also tend to sleep late some nights, and in turn, sleep in the next day. We sleep the same 6-9 hours as everyone else, and in turn, get called lazy. This is largely due to us having to contribute around the house on my parents' schedules and put aside our own work. We cannot do any focused work in the earlier parts of the day, and it tends to get left to the later parts of the day, after housework, and any preventive maintenance work is done. By the time we are done working and spending some time with one another, as is the norm for new couples, we finally go to bed around 2 to 3 a.m. most nights. Now, despite all of the above, besides tempers flaring a few times on our end, my wife and I have stood up for ourselves while trying to be respectful. Despite being insulted at every turn, I have been told I am selfish, lacking family values, and that I am a disgrace, never once stepped out of line growing up, and have always been well-behaved and good in school. So after all the issues, my wife and I decided to look for our own place, without telling mine or her parents. We found a place and signed a lease. My father-in-law owns a business and co-signed with us, so we told him first. We then told my mother-in-law and SILs, because we were staying over this past weekend when we got approved and signed the lease. Now, the hurdle is breaking it to my family. I told my sister first thing when I got home, and told my dad the next day. My sister told me it was a mistake not telling my parents I was looking for a place. But if I did, they would have tried to veto my efforts relentlessly, due to a deeply held belief her and my grandparents hold, that renting is throwing your money away, as well as a superiority complex with home ownership. My mom literally told me, "Do you want to rent a ghetto apartment like..." She stopped herself, but was going to say my wife's uncles, who rent and are happy doing so. I told my dad, and he had mixed emotions, as he thought I was going to stay for 2-3 years as initially planned. But given the situation, I want to preserve the integrity of my family ties and believe that it is best for everyone if my wife and I move out. I also want autonomy, as my family is very controlling and expects us to do things the way they did. Now, Dad said it was an eventuality, but said he felt betrayed and deceived by me not consulting him and my mom. He also said he was confused and did not know how to feel, and I could see he was holding back tears when I told him. He said it was a slap in the face, and it showed I thought very little of my relationship with my parents. Also said that it was embarrassing for him and my mom because we were moving out, as it would signal to the rest of the family and my in-laws that there were problems. Now, I have not told my mom yet, because she will go nuclear and throw a huge fit, as she did when I previously did things my own way. Nor have I told my grandparents, who I argued with previously about this subject. They all want me to buy a house or condo, which will cost me $10K or so monthly after all expenses. Whereas if I rent, I can keep my and my wife's expenses under $3,500. The purpose of my post is to ask, how should I approach the situation now, in terms of telling my mom and grandparents? I also want to know if I was wrong in any way possible. I talked to 2 different therapists, one in my culture, religion, and another who was secular, and they both told me to move out ASAP. I want to know if I was justified in doing what I did without consulting my parents, and if there was any potential strain or ending of ties, if it would have been my fault. Thanks for reading my long post, and I appreciate any help. Edit 1. I don't know if this was clear, but the move-in date for our new place is May 1st. Still gives us 2-ish weeks at my parents' place. I will provide updates as things progress. Thank you all for your support. I truly feel vindicated. Update: I was out with my dad to go to weekly worship, and he began chastising me and my wife for the decision. I stood my ground and basically said, we are leaving because of the types and frequency of problems living together has caused, and that if we are to have any relationship, then we need distance. He said it was disgraceful of me to not consult them, to which I replied, if I consulted you, there would be more issues, and you would attempt to veto my decision. He said I am throwing everything they taught me out the window, and that all their work raising me now means nothing. I pointed out that while we are thankful for the favor they did by letting us stay, it seems that all help has strings attached, and that this controlling behavior is why we need to leave. He said there wouldn't be a problem if you adhered to the agreement and stayed for 2-3 years, but I'm like, the situation has changed and is no longer tenable for us. Another qualm of his was that my wife influenced me, to which I replied it was a decision we made purely for our well-being and something we need. He had no desire to listen to my perspective and just wanted it to berate me. As he said exactly, I don't care what your intentions are. This is what it is. This is exactly why I am moving out, to break this cycle of control. I am going to tell my mom in about 45 minutes. Wish me luck. I know people said don't tell her, but cultural ramifications run deep here, so I will have to tell her. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You have overbearing, controlling, passive-aggressive parents, OP, particularly your mom. They are going to end your marriage if you stay any longer. Time to cut the apron strings, or they will suffocate you into compliance. Make sure your mom doesn't have any more access to your money. Ignore her bullying about this, and move any valuable items or documents to a safe place. Godspeed, son. Edited to confirm, I want to know if I was justified in doing what I did without consulting my parents, and if there was any potential strain or ending of ties, if it would have been my fault. Answer is, yes, you are justified. Yes, they will blame you, but it is not your fault. Comment 2. Good heavens, your post reads like you have Stockholm Syndrome. Your parents were like kidnappers who wanted to control your every move. For the sake of your marriage, you are doing the right thing. You need to be on your own and to do your best to not need help from your family. I would immediately open a new bank account for you and your wife only. You should not share a main account with your mother. I will, just as you supported your wife, your dad supported your mom. Everyone gave this a good try, but it doesn't work. You and your wife need to feel safe and comfortable in your space. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking with me on this. So, I told my mom. It went about as well as you'd expect, which is to say, not well at all. She cried, yelled, and said I was betraying the family. She even threw in that I was ruining her reputation. I tried to explain, but she wasn't having any of it. She said I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I left the room feeling like maybe she was right, but deep down, I knew we had to get out. A week later, my mom did something that shocked us all. She sold a piece of jewelry that had been in the family for generations and handed me the money. Said it was for the down payment on a house, her way of keeping us close. I was torn. It felt wrong to take it, but she insisted. My wife was against it, but I thought it could mend fences, so I took it. That was the choice that started the unraveling. We moved into our new place and things were quiet for a bit. Too quiet. My parents stopped calling. My sister said they felt abandoned. I tried reaching out, but my calls went unanswered, and it was like we didn't exist to them anymore. My wife said we were better off, but I couldn't shake the guilt. Then the bomb dropped. My dad had a heart attack. He survived, thank God, but the guilt crushed me. I rushed to the hospital, and my mom blamed me, said the stress I caused did this. I stayed by his side trying to make amends, but the damage was done. In the midst of this, my wife found out she was pregnant. Joy mixed with pain. We wanted to share the news, hoping it would bring the family back together, but my mom's reaction was cold. She said the child would grow up not knowing its grandparents because of me. The money from the jewelry turned out to be cursed. My mom demanded it back, saying it was meant for a house, not for rent. I refused, and that's when she revealed the truth. The jewelry was collateral for a loan my grandparents had taken out years ago. They were now facing legal action because of my decision to use the money elsewhere. I was stuck. If I returned the money, my wife and I would struggle with the rent and the baby on the way. If I didn't, my grandparents could lose everything. I chose to keep the money, thinking I could somehow fix it later. But deep down, I knew this was a mistake that would haunt me. The aftermath was a family torn apart. My wife and I were isolated, my parents were drowning in resentment and health issues, and my grandparents were facing financial ruin. And through it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was to blame for trying to take the easy way out.